Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Welcome back to Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry, and this is episode 97. And we're going to continue our countdown of the 100 greatest Bengals of all time. Last time we got all the way down to player number 69, Al Beauchamp. Now we're going to get us up to the top 60 by the time we get to the end of this episode. This one's fun, though, because I got a bunch of guys here that are from, I would consider my generation, the late 90s, early 2000s. When I was a kid, these guys made an impact on me and really strengthened why I became a Bengals fan and why I stayed a Bengals fan, not living in Cincinnati, right? So people have asked me all the time, well, a lot of these players that held that for me. But we're going to start this episode with one of two running backs, and they go together, and I'm very happy they ended up in the same episode. When I first did the rankings, I was looking through, like, all right, how did these running backs rank? I started breaking them down. We're going to do 8 per episode, and I got to number 68, and then I looked, and we got another one coming up in this episode. I was like, great, because they belong and they deserve to go together. So we'll start this with number 68 on the 100 greatest Bengals list. It's Boobie Clark.
A big surprise has been Boobie Clark, not drafted until the 12th round. Teamed with ESS Johnson, the Bengals may emulate Miami in having 2 1,000-yarders on the same team.
Just 12 yards short of the 1,000-yard mark. At 240 pounds, he appears to be the big back Paul Brown has coveted since the days of Marion Motley. He has fine speed for a man his size, and once he's tackled, he's still not stopped, for Boobie Clark simply drags tacklers with him. Round pick Boobie Clark was the find of the year for the Bengals and the rookie of the year in the AFC.
Charles Lee Boobie Clark was the 302nd overall pick in the 1973 draft out of Bethune-Cookman. Clark was listed at 6'2" and 245 pounds.
Finally got something started for Cincinnati midway in the second period with a play-action pass to his other wide receiver, Charlie Joyner, number 18. And Anderson followed up with a play action to fullback Boobie Clark, number 42.
Astrodome playing surface reveals the elements of a successful passing attack. Here, Anderson set up behind a perfect pass pocket. The Bengal offensive line gave Anderson ample time to throw and allowed Fritz to get behind Houston linebacker Steve Kiner. Result, 6 points.
1 tick remaining, the Bengals faced an all-or-nothing proposition. Number 42, Boobie Clark, muscled in, and the game, which had been scoreless 38 seconds before, was now tied 7-7.
The 73 Rookie of the Year, Boobie Clark, ended up playing 6 years for the Cincinnati Bengals between 73 and 1978, before playing 2 seasons with Houston after that. In all, he carried the ball 779 times for the Bengals for 2,978 yards on the ground. Clark would catch another 151 balls for 1,100 yards with a total of 27 touchdowns for Cincinnati.
Even when pressured, Anderson remained cool and found an outlet in number 35, Boobie Clark, a contender for Rookie of the Year honors. The Bengals then went ahead as last year's AFC Rookie of the Year, Charles Boobie Clark, number 42, banged in for the Bengals' first lead.
razzle-dazzle as Boobie Clark powered to 6 points. Charles Boobie Clark, who gained over 100 for the second consecutive week and scored the touchdown that enabled the Bengals to defeat a division leader for the second straight game. This week against Pittsburgh, 3 in a row would give Cincinnati a share of first place in the AFC Central.
Boobie Clark represents part 1 of a tandem backfield that we'll get to in this episode. Clark being the power, hard-running fullback. I mean, it's kind of different how we consider fullback now to what it was then, even though a lot of times they were lead blockers. It was split backfield, and they carried the ball a ton at fullback. So it just meant the bigger one of the two. And the other guy we'll see is definitely the smaller and faster version. Both very good players. Boobie Clark ended up dying in 1988 at 38 years old with blood clots in his lungs. So sad to see that. A Bengal great making our list, top 70. Next, number 67 is a linebacker. We're going to have 2 guys back-to-back from the same draft class. First, second round in 2009. You probably guessed it. It's Ray Maluga. Drafted in round 2 out of USC, Ray Maluga was supposed to be the Bengals' answer to the physical AFC North.
Yeah, Sharice Wright, the man who was Johnny on the spot. And here comes the Chargers again. Ronnie Brown goes right, but Ray Maluga is
from the 42. Here's Ridley trying to get around the corner, and they wrap him up and knock him down. Maluga gets credit for the tackle.
The ball one time. Green gonna throw it. Not gonna get there. Lorig out of the backfield was.
Mallett just hurls it down the middle. It's intercepted by Ray Maluga. And he will pitch the football.
Here's Flacco on first down. Deflected and intercepted. It's picked up by Maluga.
Ray Maluga would play for the Bengals for 8 seasons, playing in 114 games and starting 104. He ended up with 584 total tackles, 20 tackles for a loss, 9 quarterback hits, 6 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 4 sacks, and 7 interceptions. Maluga would also play and start in 5 postseason games for the Bengals.
With the pick, and he takes it back 47 yards. So Phillip Rivers.
Tight formation. Hillis. Stop for a loss. There is Tate, and he is wrapped up.
Shots in the NFL going into play today. They've had 8 of them in the last 2 weeks. And it's intercepted by Maluga. First quarter, and then the Bengals ran away from the Vikings. Here's Castle going deep, and another turnover, an interception by Maluga. And Ray Maluga with the pick.
Ray Maluga is one of those players I talked about that I really liked when I was a kid. And now I was getting older around 2009, but as that was becoming when I was really diving into the draft and starting to have my own opinions on players, when they drafted Ray Maluga in the second round, and a lot of people can probably agree and share the same feeling, that was probably the most excited I ever was for a pick until about like 2013 or so. You know, it's like first round picks, you expect them to be good. You get a guy like Ray Maluga in round 2 that the Bengals really needed that. They needed that power, that tenacity, that reckless abandon for their own body in the AFC North, where they were getting bullied around this time, leading into 2009, and they go to the playoffs that first year, back again since the first time since 2005. So Ray Maluga was a welcomed addition. Probably never lived up to being great, but he played for a long time. And being a second round pick, completely worth it. A player I will remember on the positive side for the Bengals. Now the next guy, same draft class, first round, probably the opposite end of the spectrum. A lot of people were disappointed with this pick, and yet he's only the second player, if we don't count the special teamers of Kevin Huber and Pat McInally. He's only the second player on this list so far that played for the Bengals for at least 10 years. Coming in at number 66 is Andre Smith.
Who do you think this is for the Bengals?
I don't think there's any doubt there's a major offensive tackle need here. I think it's Andre Smith, the big offensive tackle from Alabama. Forget all the stuff about what happened at the Combine. I think it's more immaturity than him being a bad kid. He's very talented, and they need help up front.
With the 6th pick in the 2009 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Andre Smith, offensive tackle, Alabama.
Well, the big fellow, 6'4", 332. He's got almost 36-inch arms, so forget being 6'4". He's got the arms of a 6'8" guy. Surprisingly nimble feet. Beware of weight fluctuations. He's been all over the place with what he weighs.
Andre Smith Jr., University of Alabama.
Smith has missed a couple of games, so he is back in the lineup.
Today, for the first time, Smith took the field with the team to participate in practice at training camp. The Alabama product missed the team's first 4 practices with a minor calf injury.
I started these clips off with the injuries and maturity and questions about his durability and fitness because it would take 2 years for Andre Smith to settle in and fully start for the Bengals in 2011. The first 2 years he rotated and was used sparingly when healthy, and then he settled in finally and became a good player. And his length, power, and run blocking stood out at the right tackle spot.
Well, now they're starting to get back to who they are as a team. You get Andre Smith with the power block inside right down here, and watch this block right here by another wide receiver. Looks a little like Larry Fitzgerald. Marvin Jones with a good lead block to get him into the end zone.
In all, Andre Smith would play 10 years for the Bengals, playing in 104 games and starting 86 in Cincinnati. He was a part of the playoff teams in 2009, 2011, 2012, 13, 14, and 15.
Play action. Dalton taking a shot down the field. A.J. Green's got it. A.J. Green gets tripped up. A touchdown save.
Smith routinely struggled with his weight and injuries and only ended up starting more than 10 games just 4 times for the Bengals. But when he did play, he was effective, despite, I think people remember some penalties and things like that. Very true. He did have his share of penalties. But when I went back and watched a lot of these teams and you see the big plays by A.J. Green and Tyler Eifert, Giovanni Bernard, Jeremy Hill, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Jermaine Gresham, a lot of our favorite players from that era. You look on the offensive line, and Andre Smith was part of a very...
Dalton, and to the end zone, what a catch!
Andre Smith was a starter on some of the best Bengals teams we've ever seen.
The next Bengals possession, Dalton looking for Donald Lee. Lee gets away.
Andre Smith probably never achieved the 6th best player in the draft where he was taken in 2009, but he did end up playing for a long time in the NFL, and a lot of that probably is his pedigree of being a first rounder and being a high valued prospect when he was coming out of Alabama. But he did have his share of penalties. He did have his injuries throughout his career, ended up playing a long time and being a very strong run blocker, tough to get around because he had those long arms and just a good solid base and frame. And that'll keep you starting at right tackle for a long time. Somebody who did not start a long time, did not start a lot of games for the Bengals, is number 65. And the reason he's on this list, despite we'll get to his numbers as the video rolls, I think it's his impact and how well we think of this player and how I think he still continues to be a figure we talk about in the development and the turning point in the early Marvin Lewis era. Number 65 is quarterback Jon Kitna. Undrafted in 1996 out of Central Washington, Jon Kitna signed with the Seattle Seahawks, playing there for 4 years and also 1 year in between with the Barcelona Dragons of the NFL Europe League, if you remember that. Jon Kitna would sign with the Bengals in 2001, where he would beat out Scott Mitchell and start 15 games.
Kitna to throw on a play action. Looking long down the middle of the field. Got Chad Johnson out there.
Between 2001 and 2003, Jon Kitna would be the Bengals starter and enjoy the most success in his career.
Throw.
Bumps into his back. Oh, now, yeah, he got him. Still got 10. 35, 30, middle infield. 20. You will not miss. Chad Johnson, touchdown.
John Kitna, talking about him, 2 years ago was the starter here, had a pretty good year. Very emotional leader.
Lead the way. All right, one play at a time. You got it.
In 2003, John Kitna was the only NFL quarterback to play every offensive snap for his team. He threw for nearly 3,600 yards with a career-high 26 touchdowns, third best in the NFL.
John Kitna made one heck of a throw. Poise, you're the leader. Poise. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Kitna led, and his teammates followed.
It started with John Kitna making a nice block.
We'll win this game because we're good enough to win the game. You don't got to do nothing special. Just show up and play.
Kitna drops to throw. Steps up in the pocket, looking long.
Come on,
looking for Peter Warwick. Long.
He's got him at the 35. Breaks out of a tackle. Nobody will catch Peter again. Touchdown, Peter Warwick.
2001 and 2002 weren't great numbers for John Kitna. I'm not trying to say that. What I am trying to say is his impact and help usher along those dark days of the 90s into the new era in 2003 when Marvin Lewis came, and then the Bengals spent the first overall pick on Carson Palmer. John Kitna still started that first year. Palmer did not start a game as a rookie, and 2003 was the first, it was the light bulb year for us to say, hey, they're going to get back on track. And John Kitna was a big part of that as their quarterback, earning himself comeback player of the year for the 2003 season.
Now looking, throwing long to the end zone.
Come on, Peter Warwick, touchdown!
End zone, has his man, Hushmanzada.
In all, John Kitna would spend 5 seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals, and all former players and even coaches will talk about his impact as a cultural, spiritual, and just locker room leader on that team, helping them turn over a new page and get on track, and helping launch careers of Chad Johnson getting his first 1,000-yard season with John Kitna. Now, Chad was an all-time great. He's going to be very high in this list. But TJ Hushmanzada, a 7th rounder as well. Rudy Johnson, a lot of these offensive linemen. Willie Anderson talks very high of John Kitna. Carson Palmer talks about his development in watching Kitna play and how big of an impact he had as his backup and helping him prepare throughout the week and getting him ready for game day. So I think Kitna's impact is worthy of a spot here, but also because of his significance of that 2003 season and starting to believe again in Cincinnati and in the Bengals, which ultimately paid off because they were correct and they were on the right track again. And John Kitna is still in the area as the head coach of Lakota East football team, high school. Moving on to number 64 on the Bengals top 100 greatest players of all time list is one of the players that performed his very best on the biggest stage. Now, this isn't with this era. We're going back to 1981 Super Bowl team era. A guy who held a record for Super Bowl performance for a very, very long time. This is one of the very best weapons, one of the best tight ends in Bengals history. It's Dan Ross. The 30th overall pick in the 1979 draft out of Northeastern, Dan Ross became an instant impact player for the Bengals, even as a rookie in 1979.
Tight end Dan Ross is having the kind of season that could make him an all-pro as he beat the Browns for several key catches.
In that rookie season, Dan Ross would start all 16 games, catching 41 passes for 516 yards and 1 touchdown. His best statistical season would come in 1981, where he'd start 16 games, catch 71 balls for 910 yards and 5 touchdowns. Ross would continue that tear of the 1981 year in 3 postseason games, catching 22 balls for 244 yards and 2 scores.
Finds the tight end, Dan Ross.
And Dan Ross out over the 45-yard line to the 47-yard line. First down and 10. Dan Ross, one of the unheralded great receivers in this league.
Exactly so, from Northeastern. He has quickness. He doesn't have speed. He's got quickness, guile, and strength. And this play, a very vivid evidence of it. Watch him, apparently stopped here, spinning away from the tackle, and then bursting upfield for another 6 yards.
In all, Dan Ross would play in Cincinnati for 6 seasons, playing in 79 games, starting 72, catching 263 passes for 3,204 yards and 16 touchdowns. This puts Dan Ross 4th in receiving yardage in Bengals history amongst tight ends, makes him 5th in career receptions, and ties him for 5th place as well in touchdowns. His 40.6 yards per game ranks best all time for the Bengals. Ross would play 1 year in the USFL. He would play 1 year for the Seattle Seahawks and 1 year for the Green Bay Packers, in all playing over 100 games and starting 87 in his NFL career.
Dan Ross's 2 touchdowns were his first 2 of the season, a sure sign the Bengals once and for all are returning to the competitive form that brought them to the brink of a Super Bowl victory 2 years ago.
I mentioned his 1981 season and the record he had in Super Bowl 16. Great year for him that culminated in the Super Bowl catching 11 balls for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. He probably would have been Super Bowl MVP had the Bengals pulled that one off.
One lone setback. Anderson moves, scrambles, throws. Collinsworth. Dan Ross, the tight end. I'm sorry.
That's what helped him. He bought a little time here. As we'll see here, he gets rushed. There's someone right at his feet. You see here, he scrambles out to the right a little, takes a second, then a third one, and finds his big tight end, number 89, Dan Ross, in there. What a target he's been for Kenny Anderson.
71 catches on the year. From Northeastern, second down, Cincinnati at the 6. Anderson drops into the end zone. Throws up to his tight end, Ross. Ross cuts upfield for Bengal first down to the 15.
It was, Dan Ross is probably one of the best tight ends in football at this. Getting deep, getting underneath between linebackers. You see, he's a big target in there, 89. He gets behind the linebackers and in front of the secondary. Watch him. You see what he did? He went down that time. See, he faked like he was blocking and then got up and came across. That is a big Cincinnati play.
Anderson drops again. Fires. Pass is caught this time by Ross. He'll be about a yard short of a first down, it appears.
Dan Ross, who had ignited the drive, capped it off with a 4-yard touchdown reception. His route was made clear when Jack Reynolds, number 64, left the middle in order to cover Pete Johnson, who flared out into the flat, leaving Ross with only number 27, Carlton Williamson, to beat. So as the Bengals rolled, so did the clock. Dan Ross's second touchdown catch narrowed the score to San Francisco 26, Cincinnati 21.
I'll tell you, he did, and he went all to the inside, didn't save any time other than the penalty. The penalty hurt because that stopped the clock. The Bengals had no timeout. Watch him find Ross in the end zone.
Tremendous performance for Ross in that Super Bowl. That record would stand for a while. His 71 catches in that season, 81, would stand until Carl Pickens would break that. I believe it was 99. So that year for him was tremendous. He didn't make the Pro Bowl that year. I think he was second team All-Pro. 82, he would make the Pro Bowl, usually a year after type thing. And that's when he would make his first Pro Bowl. And now that I think about it, as I'm watching my background here, when he went to the USFL Breakers, USFL for 1 year, it was to the Breakers, which is full circle. I've held that helmet back there for a long time. And that is they were the Portland, Boston, and New Orleans Breakers. He went there for a little bit and then came back to the Bengals before leaving. Moving on the list now. I teased the other of the two-headed running backs the Bengals had in the 70s that really thunder and lightning, with Boobie Clark being the power. This next guy on the list is ESS Johnson, his running mate.
Another big Bengal surprise has been Stumpy ESS Johnson, number 19, a speed burner from Grambling.
was number 19, Essex Johnson. Was a great running back. Never got his due. He injured his knee in our playoff game against Miami in 1973 and was never really quite the same after that. But I remember just throwing, it was 86 halfback curl was Bill Walsh's. We had Bob Trumpy was on a little curl route. The halfback did a little in route. I read the middle linebacker. If he went towards the tight end, I threw it to Essex. I'd throw a 5-yard pass. He'd take it 80 yards. You'd hand off to him on 28 Grace, and he'd go around and follow the guard, and he'd make about 20. So he was just an outstanding running back.
That was legendary Kenny Anderson, remembering Essex Johnson very fondly. The former 6th-round pick in the 1968 draft by the expansion Cincinnati Bengals, another one of our baby Bengals, one of the originals. Johnson was a converted defensive back that moved to halfback once he made it to the NFL, and what a move that was. Johnson would spend a few years as the number 2, number 3 type back behind Paul Robinson and some others like Jess Phillips. And it wasn't until the 1972 season, now the Bengals were in the NFL from the AFL, where he earned the name the Essex Express. He had a breakout year. He started 11 games. He had 212 carries for 825 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also caught 29 passes for 420 yards.
19 did an excellent imitation of, well, Essex Johnson. Last season, Johnson threaded and bounced for an average of more than 6 yards per carry. Last week, he could manage only 5.5 yards per carry. The Bengals have a number of accomplished running backs, but 5'9" Essex Johnson is something else again.
It would be the next year where Johnson had his best career year in 1973, starting 14 games, all 14 games. He had 195 touches for 997 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, but also 28 catches for 356 yards in all. I mean, this guy averaged 12.7 yards per catch. So just like Kenny Anderson was saying, what a weapon he was as a receiver downfield or making guys miss, low to the ground type running, great balance. You see it in these clips. The make you miss, the home run speed. Essex Johnson had it all. Kenny Anderson even said it. He got hurt in that playoff game against the Dolphins. Wasn't the same, but what a burst of awesomeness he was for a short span.
Essex Johnson ran the counter play to perfection. He popped through a huge hole, then outraced everyone, and in one loud cannon shot, Essex Johnson had put the Bengals back on top. It was nothing new for Johnson. He had electrified the NFL all year with his dazzling runs, and this one was the league's longest of the year.
In all, Essex Johnson would play 8 years in Cincinnati, playing in 98 games, starting just 31, but touched the ball 675 times for 3,070 yards and 18 scores. In the air, he'd catch 121 balls for 1,541 yards and 11 touchdowns as well.
The spotlight fell on Essex Johnson as the Bengals' only experienced setback. With his unique hide-and-seek, low-to-the-ground style of running, the Essex Express flowed and ebbed, darted and danced, and made tacklers miss all season long. Essex fell just 3 yards short of 1,000 yards. And while his great season was not unexpected.
So Essex Johnson and Boobie Clark, here's a fact for you. That's the first combo of running back to go over 1,300 yards from scrimmage together in the same season, 1973. The Browns had a couple that went over 1,000 together. That was the first time that ever happened in the 60s, I want to say. The Bengals were the first duo ever to have two go over 1,300. First ever to go over 1,200 technically, but they got 1,335 plus. The other one was 1,353. So great combo for that 1 year together. I mean, they were good together for a few years, but that culminated in that 73 season. We're going to go to another part of a duo with this next guy here. The first one before we get to the other guy, probably in a couple episodes, I would say. I'd have to look at the rankings and do math. Let's not do it. Part of a linebacker duo that was drafted in the same year. So we've had two guys, Maluga and Andre Smith, that were drafted together in the same draft. We've had two running backs that were part of a historic pairing. And now we've got two linebackers, but the first one here, and I think you know who it is by me saying it, at 62 on the greatest Bengals of all time, is linebacker Brian Simmons.
With the 17th choice in the first round, the Cincinnati Bengals select linebacker from University of North Carolina, Brian Simmons.
From All-American at North Carolina to making the Bengals' 40th anniversary team, Brian Simmons was steady, consistent, and a team leader that helped get the Bengals out of the dark 90s into the 2000s.
By number 56, Brian Simmons, who has excelled as a Bengals middle linebacker the last 5 seasons.
The Cincinnati Bengals have the lead for the first time this season. Brian Simmons with the interception and the return for the touchdown.
Simmons would play for the Bengals for 9 seasons, appearing in 120 games, starting in 115 between 1998 and 2006. That means he saw just one playoff game in the 2005 season. But Simmons racked up some stats. 726 tackles with the Bengals, 52 tackles for a loss, 23 sacks, 13 forced fumbles, 8 fumble recoveries, and 11 interceptions. And outside of the 2000 season, Simmons was very, very durable.
It looks as if he's just a far cry from that. Brunell, pass tip, picked off by Brian Simmons.
Mirrors to try to get something done.
Dilger, the tight end, shifted in the backfield. It's picked off. That's Brian Simmons, the middle linebacker. Simmons with the interception and a touchdown for Cincinnati.
First and 20, Feely. Brian Simmons has the interception and a 50-yard touchdown.
I think they call that going downhill.
I think so.
And I always thought Simmons was very, very clutch. You see this interception against the previous year's Super Bowl champion Buccaneers. He had an interception against the previous Super Bowl year Ravens. And then, like, when the Bengals got good in 2005, they needed an interception to clinch a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there he was, playing his best in the best moments, Brian Simmons.
23-year-old. Third down and long. Pumps and wants to go deep. And that one's almost and is intercepted by Brian Simmons. And Simmons on the return. Down the sidelines, flags are down. And finally Simmons wrapped up at the 27-yard line with the 24th interception of the season for the Bengals, far and away the lead in the NFL.
Well, I'm not sure that after Ben hurting his hand like that.
That was the thing about Simmons, really. You did not have to take him off the field. He could run, he could cover, he could hit, he could blitz. He had a lot of sacks. He had forced fumbles. He had impact plays. He was good against the run. He could play middle linebacker, outside linebacker. He did it all in his 9 years with the Bengals. You just wish from 98 to 2003, when he was at his peak, that the Bengals were also good. Simmons is going to fall with a lot of other players from those 90s teams that, deserve the spotlight because they were good enough. They should have been known throughout the league, but the team wasn't there. They never got it. They never got the magnifying glass or they never got to get put on the biggest stage or on the primetime games for the world to watch. Brian Simmons is one of the guys I think of that, had he have been on better teams, had he have been somewhere else in a different situation, despite he played really, really well for an organization that couldn't find its footing for a while. And it's a shame because he probably deserves to be even higher on our own list here. but his impact and greatness is somewhat diminished because they didn't have the team success largely while he was there. On the other end of the spectrum, not a first-round pick. The first of 3 guys that will potentially be on this list, only 2 qualify because one is still active, but the first of 2 definitely from the same draft class then, so we're keeping a few themes here on this episode today, was a 4th-round pick, unlike Simmons. Did not start right away. Started a couple games his rookie year. But then once he got in there, the second season, he was a strong, stable starter and one of the best offensive lines the Bengals have ever had. Number 61 on today's episode is guard Clint Boling.
Clint Boling, Georgia.
Number 65 there at left guard out of Georgia. Next to who's going to be really high for us, Andrew Whitworth, was Clint Boling.
That's Bernard in motion. Dalton steps into it, has a man wide open. Pass caught by Jones. And Marvin Jones still working down inside the 15. What a start for Cincinnati. That one good for 44.
Clint Boling would play in Cincinnati from 2011 to 2018. 8 seasons, 111 games appeared, 109 starts. He would appear in 3 playoff games, 2012, 2014, and 2015. Boling was known for being smart, dependable, consistent, and very versatile. He could play either guard spot. He would be a backup and emergency center. He even started a game at left tackle when the Bengals really needed it. And he consistently performed as an athletic run blocker and very good pass protector.
Shift, come over, and then that's not all. Watch as these 2 guys pull after the play snap. They're going to pull and come around and lead out perfectly executed run game as they lead Hill right around the end. Everybody gets a hat on a hat, and it takes so long for the safety to get up there.
It's a counter play. You're going to see left guard Clint Boling, left tackle Andrew Whitworth pull. Good patience by Hill. Missed tackle. And how about this finish in speed? Nice downfield block by Mohamed Sanu.
That time, watch Clint Boling get untouched out on this linebacker. And their 2 linebackers, Ellerby and Wheeler, don't like head-on-head contact like that. They like to run around blocks. If you get a clean, big body on
this ball game, finally get the final 3 on this one.
See the power, 65 and 85, shoulder to shoulder. Good job both by Boling and Eifert.
Boling is one of the latest draft picks to make this list, being in 2011. So we have PFF data for his entire career. His pass blocking efficiency rating was at 97.5%. Playing about 7,200 snaps, Clint Boling was only penalized 18 times. That's once every 400 snaps or once every 6 games. Clint Boling wraps up the first 40 players, 100 through 61 on the 100 greatest Bengals list. From here on out, the 60 and up, really, really good players. Really players that played for a long time or had instant or lasting impact on the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think now is the point where it's like, and I liked a lot of these guys. Like Brian Simmons to me is one of my favorite players growing up. Clint Boling was the model of consistency and one of the best day 3 picks they've had, especially over the last 20 years. We'll have a couple more of them actually. But as we go, it's just going to be more and more fun highlights and fun players. And, you know, I think this is getting to be a fun series. I hope you're enjoying it. Leave your comments. Who's your favorite player of the grouping? Maybe a favorite memory of the grouping we just had, or a player of this last episode that you remember fondly. Until next time, on Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics, I'm your host, Joe Goodberry. Hooday.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realized self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.